Other comments on today's program or questions or anything? Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few questions for Dr. Catherine Hayhoe.
This is a video clip from Austin, Texas City Council meeting where somebody named Zimmerman had some, what he calls, questions for Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. Of course, what he really had was assertions under the pretense of asking questions. Let's take a look.
I noticed that you made it to Time Magazine 100 Most Influential People in 2014, and congratulations on that. I don't know if I'm the most influential person in District 6.
Oh my no gods, this guy is a representative in Texas. If he is seriously a representative of people in District 6, then I for damn sure never want to visit District 6.
So, you're way ahead of me there. But I do have a couple of questions.
By questions, he means assertions.
I've been looking at global warming questions and now climate change.
Global warming, of course, is one part of climate change. It is one result of climate change.
And maybe I'll make a few comments and you can respond. One of the problems I think global warming had was the science is very, very, very complicated, and you would know that.
Yes, for a moron, the science behind human-caused climate change is very, very, very complicated. Here we have a software engineer addressing a preeminent climatologist noted throughout the world for her work, telling her the basic high school physics involved in human-caused climate change is very, very complicated. No, very, very, very complicated.
And some of the satellite data we had of the tropospheric lower stratosphere, when we started to get this data in the 80s, which is also a problem, right? Because we have like 30 years of satellite data and the world is maybe millions of years old.
That's right. Earth is maybe a few million years old. Hey, we've got 30 years of satellite data for 0.8% of the climate system on the planet, which for some reason software engineer Zimmerman thinks is a problem. Let's see what he says the problem is in that. A few million years.
And we're looking at 30 years. Kind of a big problem.
Kind of a big problem if you're a software engineer.
But it actually showed that that temperature was declining.
Exactly, and it was predicted to do that because the atmosphere is expanding because it is getting warmer. Sections of the atmosphere was expected to cool because when you heat a gas, it expands. When a gas expands, it cools. The troposphere is getting higher and higher and higher from the surface of the planet because the atmosphere as a whole is warming and sharply and anomalously, and all of the scientists out there agree on why.
While some of the ground temperatures were increasing.
Some? Almost all of the ground temperatures. The weather stations show an increase in average temperature. Some?
It's a lot of confusion in this.
That's right, a computer programmer is confused about basic climatology.
But I have a really visceral reaction.
Might I suggest Representative Zimmerman, Pepto-Bismol,
against the climate change argument.
What the bloody fuck is, quote, the climate change argument?
For the simple reason that when you look back in time, and there have been dramatic climate changes before humanity ever existed. So the problem with climate change is if the climate changes, of course you could say climate change. If the climate does not change, that's climate change.
No, if the climate does not change, which by the way is the default condition on planet Earth, that is called climate. That is how climate is defined. Climate is static. weather conditions in regions of a planet such as, I don't know what planet Representative Zimmerman is on, planet Earth, where most of the rest of us are. Climate in regions of planet Earth, stable for long periods of time, called climates. When it changes, it's called climate change. By the way, the problem is not climate change in the past. Mr. Representative Zimmerman, the problem is climate change now! Not climate change millions and millions and millions of years ago. Oh, I'm sorry, a few million years ago.
Because for eons of time before humans existed, there has been climate change.
He is talking to one of the preeminent climatologists on the planet.
So climate change is normal.
No, climate change is abnormal. Climate is normal. That is what climate, the word, means.
But the way the politics of this is set up...
Fuck the politics in the ass with a stick. Talk to the scientist instead.
is if it changes and gets hotter and drier, climate change. If it gets cooler and wetter, climate change.
Yes.
If there's no climate change at all, it's climate change.
No.
I see Chicken Little in this whole thing.
That's right, because you are a computer programmer and a politician, not a scientist.
If you think about it, because you can now say everything's climate change, and no matter what happens, it's all climate change.
That's right, she could say that. She never has. No climatologist has ever said that. No scientist has ever said that. But by golly, she could say that. All of her colleagues and peers would laugh at her. They would be concerned about her mental health, but yes, she could say that.
And the worst thing that could be done to humanity is put government bureaucrats in charge of carbon dioxide emissions or whatever it would be.
How very odd that all of the world's science organizations that made an opinion on the subject said the exact opposite thing, including all of the United States science organizations who have said government needs to regulate human-released greenhouse gases is the only way to solve this crisis. No wonder Representative Zimmerman is a politician and not a scientist.
Because there's no way to have a definitive science on something so nebulous.
The nebula, Representative Zimmerman, is up here where your brain should be. The physics involved in human-caused climate change have been known for almost 200 years. The quantum mechanics involved in how carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere prevent Earth from freezing has been known since 1926. If the nebula up there between your ears is causing you some confusion, might I suggest some mental health care service by a professional. If you cannot afford it, check out something called Obamacare.
And so foolish as climate change. And I got one final point. You don't have to be as smart as a fifth grader to know that what causes the climate is the sun.
That's right. In year 2013, there were more than 14,000 peer-reviewed science papers published in the science journal literature throughout the world, representing more than 38,800 scientists. And they're not as smart as a 5-year-old or Representative Zimmerman might be a moron. Which, I ask, is more likely? Number one, all the world's scientists and experts in the subject are wrong. Or, number two, Representative Zimmerman is an idiot.
The sun. I have people tell me carbon dioxide warms the earth. No, it doesn't.
Then tell us, Representative Zimmerman, why do all the world's physicists and climatologists and astrophysicists and astronomers and others say that it does?
The sun warms the earth. And there is more energy in our sun than humanity can comprehend.
Remember, this clown is talking to one of the world's most accomplished climatologists. He's telling her these things.
And one solar emission, right? One of these coronal mass ejections, staggering amount of energy. They don't have to get a permit from the EPA, and they wreak all kinds of havoc, right, on our satellites and our... I'm sorry, I could go on and on, but I think you get the drift.
Yes, the drift is, you're a moron. What else is your point?
I'm really, really upset about this political move of saying climate change, now we have to have the government in charge of climate. It angers me, and I think it should.
That's right. You know what really angers me, what really frosts my balls? The Centers for Disease Control. Every time that they stop an epidemic and save human life and health and prevent misery and suffering, that really, really, really angers me. And clean air, you know, the Environmental Protection Agency in Southern California, they cleaned up the air. The air is no longer a burnt orange. It's no longer, when you breathe it, your chest just aches and you have to sit down and gasp for breath. That really angers me, that's no longer happening for most people. Not like when I was a child in that area, where walking to school was an agony just to get to school and learn that school was closed because the air was too unhealthy to hold school that day. And then I'd have to walk back again and clutching my chest in agony because the air was so bad. I miss the old days. Now that the air is clean, it really, really angers me.
I think if the EPA could be in charge of the sun, that might create bigger problems than we have today.
Well, that's the plan.
Yes. No.
Did you catch that? She said that if the EPA was in charge of the sun, that would be a bigger problem. Representative Zimmerman said, quote, "That's the plan," end of quote.
No, I appreciate your comments, and so let me respond very briefly, because this could be the topic of a whole day of getting into the fun science, which is what I like. There are a lot of really good questions, and you've gone through quite a few of them right here. And so one of my personal favorite resources is a website called skepticalscience.com, and its motto is, every true scientist should be a skeptic. I love this website because it's gone through and it's taken every single major question that we hear about climate change. Hasn't climate changed in the past? It certainly has. Isn't the sun the main factor controlling the Earth's temperature? Absolutely. Aren't there natural cycles? Yes, there are. Wasn't there some satellite data back in the 80s that showed that the atmosphere was cooling? There was, until they found that they'd switched out a plus and a minus sign in their code. So I love this website because it doesn't just give opinions, it actually links to scientific data and scientific facts. You can read the papers yourself if anybody wants to. So I recommend that website, skepticalscience.com, to anybody who's interested. Let me respond very briefly, though, to the gist of your comments, and that is that I think you were very clear, and what you said agrees very closely with the research, in that the main reason we object to the reality of this problem is because the solutions that have been presented are big government solutions. And so that's why I think it's so important to give free market solutions a voice in this argument. Because, as my husband says, a thermometer is not Democrat or Republican. And when we look around this world, it isn't about trusting what our 30-year-old satellites say. It's about looking at 26,500 indicators of a warming planet. Many of them we can see in our own backyards. It's also about looking at records, and this is what we climate scientists do. We look at long records going back thousands and even millions of years. And when we see that climate has changed significantly. We also see that today, if climate were changing because of the sun, we'd be getting cooler, because energy from the sun's been going down over the last 40 years. If it were changing due to orbital cycles that bring our ice ages and our warm interglacial periods like we're in right now, our temperature peaked 8,000 years ago, and we were actually in the long, slow slide into the next ice age until the Industrial Revolution. So just circling back to my road analogy, as humans, what we want is we want a stable climate. We don't want it to be colder. We don't want it to be warmer, because we've built this vulnerability into our system. So, for example, if climate were changing naturally 1,000 years ago and sea level went up 3 feet, and we lived in Houston, what would we do 1,000 years ago? Pick up the tent and move. If rainfall patterns shifted and we couldn't grow our crops here anymore 1,000 years ago, what would we do? We just move 100, 200 miles north. The reason why we care about a changing climate is because we can't pick up and move anymore. And so warmer or cooler, it's just as bad for us. We like it nice and stable. Thank you.
Thank you.
She kicked his ass politely.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.